We tuned in on Sunday for the Super Bowl. Kansas City Chiefs, San Francisco 49ers, and we'll be watching. Folks will be cheering, and they'll be talking about everything and looking at those players. But how many people are thinking about what their lives will be once the cheering stops? We've talked about the NFL's promise to compensate former players who develop dementia and other brain diseases tied to concussions. And the NFL has awarded $1.2 billion to more than 1,600 athletes. But the Washington Post found the league saved hundreds of millions of dollars by rejecting payouts. Joining me now from San Diego is Roxanne Gordon. Her husband, Eamon C. Gordon, played 8 seasons in the NFL. He retired from the Kansas City Chiefs in 2012. He was diagnosed with traumatic brain injury in 2012 and has been fighting to get his NFL concussion settlement. Ricky Ray, a former NFL player, joins us from Alexandria, Virginia. I'm glad to have both of you here. First and foremost, walk us through, Roxanne, how difficult this battle has been with the NFL.
Sure. Good evening, Roland. We've been fighting since 2017. When we first entered into the class action settlement, we were told it's as simple as the retired player, getting diagnosed from a board-certified neurologist that they have traumatic brain injury, and they will be paid. It was far from the truth. Here we are almost 7 years later, and we're still fighting. My husband, Amon, has brain bleeds. He has tangles in his brain. He has been diagnosed by like 4 different neurologists with concussion damage, and I still have not received any positive news on the settlement. We are still fighting. For a matter of fact, our last appeal was submitted today. So we are waiting for the courts to, again, see if they approve us or side with the NFL again. The NFL has fought tooth and nail not to pay him, and their reasoning is because his IQ is too high. He's too smart. His scores are too high. So
wait, I'm sorry. They're saying that because his IQ is high, that the stuff he's experiencing actually doesn't exist. So what they're saying is if he hit a low IQ, guess what? He got no problems?
Like the race norming, basically. He went to Stanford, graduated from Stanford University. He has a superior IQ. So when they test him, they're comparing him against people with a normal IQ. So they're saying he's not impaired. He doesn't have brain injury because he's not scoring low enough. So in their eyes, he would have to be a vegetable to be able to be paid.
Wow. Ricky, when you hear that, and you have other players, what stories are you hearing as well?
Well, I hear exactly what Roxanne is talking about. And, Roland, one of the things, first and foremost, thank you guys for having us on your show tonight. And, Roland, it brings about 2 things, frustration and it brings out about concerns. What Roxanne is talking about is the frustration. We've been at this thing for almost 7 years. And, the overall process, selecting, going through the attorneys, the doctor's appointments, you got the results determination process. All of this is that, comes down to an unequal distribution of compensation. So the NFL is boasting, as you just mentioned, about the articles that recently came out, and then they sent out their specific talking points saying that, they have spent $1.2 billion. What we were talking about tonight, though, is the other billion that needs to be spent on the guys that's not getting this particular compensation. This thing is way too long. No way, shape, and form. I myself, as a claimant, have been in this process for the past 7 years, and just now we're reaching a deadline of March the 4th to be able to go back for the race norming, which again is a whole different conversation that happened during this settlement. However, Roland, my point with that is that even with the race norming and all of the other things that's put in place for doctor's appointments and trying to get some results, it shouldn't be 7 years before you can go through at least the evaluation process, not even talking about the determination process if something is even wrong with you or not. That's just the frustration part about it. The concerns is that, again, the league is boasting about how much money they're putting out, but really, again, it's not much money they need to put out to make sure that we all are being taken care of, our families, and to look at the real issues of what's going on is with the concussion. We got into this with concussions that ended up causing dementia. It can cause Alzheimer's and the things like that. And the NFL within themselves, they saying that they wish they hadn't even settled this particular settlement. They would have to take it to court because they don't believe that these repetitive head hits and these concussions has anything to do with the long-term effect of our health, Roland.
And Roxanne, look, I love it how these teams demand loyalties from players, but when it's time to cut contracts, tell them to take less money, they got no problem doing so. The reality is the NFL does not have guaranteed contracts, unlike baseball, unlike basketball. They have the shortest careers, the most injuries, and the most health care needs after the playing days are over. So the NFL is by far the richest sports league.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we're talking, these guys have, head injuries as well as orthopedic issues as well. And there's no lifetime medical. A lot of these guys don't even have medical insurance, Roland. They can't even go to a doctor. And the NFL is hoping they just kind of die and go away, deny till you die. And a lot of them have passed, unfortunately. But there are still a lot out there living that need help. And the NFL needs to live up to their obligation and take care of these men that they built this billion-dollar industry off their backs, period.
Questions for the panel. Matt, you're first.
I have a question, and I'm sorry if I misunderstood something, but isn't it correct that the NFL was using a different metric whereby they were judging the, starting IQs of former black players with neurological issues as compared to white players? And that was part of the lawsuit, if I remember correctly. So how does that factor into their reticence to pay on these claims now? I mean, is that still a part of the litigation?
Yes, you're correct. And that's called a race norming. That came into effect after the settlement. And there was two players that realized that there was something wrong with the evaluation process. So they sued. This came out to be a race norming where they thought that us as black players, we were at a lower deficiency than white players. At first, they admitted that, no, that's not happening. The league council, that's not happening. Then they found out it was happening. For them to go back and then to rectify that problem, they said that any persons that had gone through the evaluation process with that particular norming scheme would be able to do it again. So that's where we are now, being able to go back and redo the testing, but there's a deadline for that testing that was March the 4th. So if you're not registered between now to March 4th of this year, you're not going to be able to even get that VAP testing unless you have to pay for it yourself and so forth and so on. So it's always a hurdle. And, the more hurdles that we have, the more complicated it is, and, the attrition for these players. And we're looking at players that has already played the game for some time ago. So it's elderly players, that former players. It's not that many when you look at the big scheme of players involved with this particular settlement, but it's always a hurdle put up in front of us so that we can't go through the process in a normal way. And again, I'm not knocking it, and it's great that the 1.2 has already been paid, but there's another 1.2 that needs to be paid as well. And, do that before the attrition takes care, then these players are no longer here.
Kelly.
Can I ask a follow-up?
Yep, go ahead.
So just really quickly, the follow-up question, though, is in terms of the actual litigation, has the judge at any point, or the special master or whomever's administrating the claims, have they, issued any edict that says, look, we know you're race norming, therefore that throws into question all of the data and all of the metrics, and therefore we're going to either order computation of the claims at a certain level? I mean, how is that race norming fixed in? Because to me, it seems like that invalidates anything that the NFL is saying about how they're determining who should be paid and who's not.
It does. Roxanne, you can chime in, but it does. And, as I mentioned before, they're rectifying this problem is letting us go back through the neurologists and all of the neuros to make sure that we're being reevaluated. But that process is a little skewed as well, because I'm pretty much sure that there is no transition conversation between the doctors that did that at first and the current doctors that we're having. The biggest problem with this thing with the doctors, there's not enough doctors. So, we have to travel at least a 150-mile radius or go to a specific doctor that is diagnosed through our attorneys. But there's not enough doctors for this process. Hence, that this whole concussion settlement started 7 years ago, and we're just now going through, or some guys are just now coming to the point of going through the evaluations. That's way too long. I mean, if you set a doctor's appointment in 2014 and here we are in 2017 and here we are in 2024 and we haven't been to the doctors yet, that's a problem within itself. That is not being addressed. You know, the claims that we're looking at that has gotten better, but that really has not gotten better. And that's a major concern that we are having.
Kelly?
Sure. So on average, if there is an average, how many complainants are in this suit? And on average, if you have an idea of how much money would or should be allocated to each member of this suit. And secondly, for those players who have since died, is there any recourse for the families to take advantage of in this case?
Ricky can jump in on the averages, but players who passed away, if their brains were sent in after they passed away and they were diagnosed with CTE, there's no compensation for them whatsoever. The only time I've seen people compensated after that is when a lot of press is surrounding the situation and then the NFL caves and compensates them. But no, to answer your question, no. If they pass away and it's found that they had CTE, the NFL won't pay for that.
Mike?
And the NFL is saying that CTE is not the problem, but it really is a problem. You know, this settlement got started for us because of concussions and the repetitive hits that we have and the concussions in general. The NFL knew that concussions was causing these problems and sort of put that under the rug like they do everything else concerning players. The problem with that is that when the players found this out, the NFL said, okay, and they call us allegedly doing this, right? Not that it's really happening. They pay their commissioner $200 million a year to say that this is not a problem for folks and whatever. 2 weeks ago, you guys were watching a game during the playoffs, and you guys remember that there was a player coming in to make a tackle, and the other player's helmet actually broke. Now, here we are getting ready to go into one of the biggest games of the year, and I'm probably the only one that's talking about this particular situation. So either it was too cold for that equipment or the helmet wasn't really qualified. And here we are. And for a fact, this player didn't even leave the field. They brought a new helmet onto the field and put the helmet on, and the guy kept playing.
Yeah, that was Patrick Mahomes, and the company actually said the helmet worked like it was supposed to work. I thought that was sort of interesting.
Well, and I've been playing. I played this game since I was 9 years old. No helmet ever broke like that in my time frame. So this is my point. The NFL, to answer her question, is the NFL playing fair? They're not playing fair. They want us to go through these obstacles and these hoops, and they got all of these barriers set up for us through this process. And there is not a lump sum of money that each one of us is supposed to get. Everybody's different. I mean, Amon's case is different from mine, and anybody else's cases is different. We all come from different scenarios where someone may be functioning and somebody may not be functioning. So it's up to the evaluation of these doctors to make sure that they are diagnosing what's going on with these individuals. So the NFL knows this, and and they put up these obstacles so we can't even go through the process.
Michael.
Very quickly, for the Super Bowl, we know that the 30-second commercial is going for about $7 million. What role do you think that corporations that profit off the NFL, that will profit off of commercials, what role do you think corporations play in getting just compensation for former NFL players who have brain damage, CTE, et cetera? And also, what role do you think fans play who buy tickets, who buy jerseys, who fuel this as well?
Well, I don't think either one is playing a role. I don't think the corporations who spend those millions of dollars are paying attention to what happens to the players when they're not on the field anymore. The fans are not really familiar with this because this only is a part-time subject. We need to have this out front all the time so everybody can come familiar with it. More players, former players and current players need to be talking about this, as well as the actual fans should be talking about it. The more people we have talking about it, the more actions that we're going to get. But, we have these segments right now for the Super Bowl and we're talking about it. Then it gets swept under the rug for another years. And then all of a sudden, as I mentioned before, the attrition rate plays in and then there's nothing else to talk about. It's not that many guys that's in this settlement. You know, these owners can go out and buy their toys for $200 million. They pay $20 million for maintenance on these yachts that they have. They pay the commissioner $200 million a year, but they're having a problem paying for folks that's already been out there giving their efforts and making sure that their products are making the money that they have to have those particular luxury items. But when it comes to the health of the players, it's just put them to the side.
And if I can add to what
Yep,
Rick
go ahead.
is saying,
Final comment. Go ahead.
one thing that the NFL does really well is separate people. Like you were speaking earlier, Roland, I have mine, you get yours.
Yep.
Everybody who watches football, a lot of the fans think that everybody's making millions of dollars. That's not true.
Yep.
Minimum wage in the NFL is under $1 million, and most guys are making that. There's a handful of guys making the $200 and $300 million.
Well, they also don't realize that the NFL network, the NFL has guaranteed TV contracts, and so and they get all their money at the beginning of the season, and so that's how they're able to stop players from striking, because the owners can get through a whole season because they got their money up front. So, and again, players don't have guaranteed contracts. Other thing that people need to understand when they see these, quote, eye-popping contracts, they don't realize if you sign a 5-year, $80 million contract, the last 3 years are irrelevant. You got to pay attention to the first 2 years. Is there any guaranteed money in that? Because they backload a lot of these contracts, and they're able to get out of them in year 3, or they'll tell a player, take a several $1 million pay cut. See, a lot of people forget when Colin Kaepernick, they asked him when the Broncos said, oh, we'll trade for you, but you got to take a pay cut. He opted not to, and he took all of his money in San Francisco. So they don't understand how that game is being played. The NFL absolutely is about keeping these billionaires being billionaires, and they do not want to pay not only players playing today, but they sure as hell don't want to play former players.
That's true.
Roxanne, Ricky, we appreciate it. Keep up your fight. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.